Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. It's top of the hour, so we can go ahead and get started. Sid, looks like you've got the first two questions. Did you want to go ahead and verbalize those?
Sure. I'd be happy to. Thanks for the presentation. There was a mention of categories in here, and I thought that was. I wondered whether that was the same as the categories as defined on our handbook product categories page.
Yeah, sorry, I think I cut out for a bit. You were asking about categories and if they're the same as the categories page. You know, I actually renamed slide 5 just before this call. It previously said what we do. And I renamed it to growth categories to give a little bit better understanding of how we're breaking down the growth work. So under telemetry and fulfillment groups, yes, those are the correct categories. For the other column, the activation, adoption, upsell, and retention sections, those are not actually official categories on our product page. They're just kind of segregations of growth work, or buckets of growth work, as you will. And so I can make sure that naming is more consistent, Sid. My apologies on that.
Yeah, thanks. That'd be great. Categories as a known connotation, and especially since this really deals with 6 categories: telemetry, fulfillment, activation, adoption, upsell, and retention. Now it's instead showing 6. The addition I gave is that I think that analysis might be very confusing with our metrics category under manage, which we can rename to analysis, but maybe not. I'm cool with either, but we shouldn't have something that overlaps. Licensing and transactions, I think it's the same thing. So I think it's confusing to make that into separate boxes. It should be, that's the whole problem. We want it to be one integrated process. We want to have kind of cloud fulfillment of everything. So I think by separating those two things, I don't think we're setting that team up for the right way to frame that work.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. You're almost like setting up a silo between licensing and transactions and handling them separately when they should be intertwined.
Exactly.
Okay, I can.
And it might be a stretch, but you can think about collection and analysis that way too. Like, it's the same thing. If you want to know something, you set up a collection of that, and you get to it. So I wouldn't go there into bucketing that. Because before you know, you have separate team members working on these things. I'll proceed to my second question. The idea was to have 4 growth teams: activation, adoption, upsell, and retention. And maybe let's take a step back. We have 6 growth teams, those 4 I mentioned, and fulfillment and telemetry. Right now we have 3 of them where we bundle activation, adoption, upsell, and retention. What is the timeline to get to an engineering group for those?
I can answer that one, Sid. The timeline, the OKR was to get 6 engineers by the end of July, and that's on track. So there'll be 6 full stack engineers. 2 of them are starting next week. 1 at the end of this week, end of this month, and 3 others are almost at the offer stage.
Great. And what's the timeline beyond that? What's going to be the next split? Are you going to split one team up to 4? Or are you going to do one team up to 2? Where, I don't know, you say like adoption and activation will be 1, and upsell and retention will be 1, and then we'll split them again 2 months later. What's your thinking?
Initially, it'll depend on the work that comes through. There'll be low-hanging fruit that means that we may concentrate on a specific stage. And then as we get more data, more granularity, and more team members, then we can split them out into equal-sized groups. My understanding is that for the next quarter, there'll be another 6 engineers coming on board.
Cool. And we're on. So we're tracking to have 4 separate engineering teams by the end of the year?
At this stage, yes.
Cool. I heard that it was hard to get kind of full stack engineers. That was an assumption we made while we did the planning. might be a wrong assumption. Maybe we don't want full stack engineering. We want separate front end and back end people. Our assumption was that since we want to move super fast in growth, it's handy if people can do multiple things. But if that delays things, please revisit that assumption. Like you're going to do the work, so you get to decide.
Right now, we're on track to hit our hiring targets. I don't have the data to know whether the hiring of the full stack engineers has been at a slower rate than that of back-end engineers. I'm not too sure what the rejection rates are across the two groups.
Cool. Yeah. And you don't need any data because we didn't have any data when we took the decision either. So
sure.
Your call whether you want to go maybe parts full stack, part front end, back end, or keep doing full stack. But anyway, that's certainly not something you have to prove. We'll just follow your lead there.
Sure.
And you didn't ask this, Sid, but just to highlight and call out, the goal was for a product manager for each 4 of those buckets of work. So adoption, upsell, retention, and activation. And we had our first growth PM start last week. We have our second one starting next week, and then the previous or the subsequent 2 starting on August 5th, which is in slide 2. And so the product team will be full staffed here in early August, which is really exciting.
Yeah, that is super exciting, and that's super well done. That was not an easy thing to hire for, so really well done, and I'm really excited about that. And I think we'll have a lot of pressure on Bartek's team soon because those 4 PMs are going to have a lot of requests. So that will almost automatically lead us to hire. And if you're watching this on YouTube, we're hiring engineering positions for this. Please do apply. And it's going to be super fun, these teams, because they're going to make a huge impact on our IACV and our results.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun team to be a part of because you're going to get to watch some really important metrics move across the company. Not, of course, there's going to be user metrics, but there's going to be financial metrics that are going to be directly tied to this group. And I just want to echo Sid's comment. This is going to be a really fun and exciting team to be a part of. Emily, looks like you have the next question.
Yeah, good morning, happy Monday. Big shout out to Bartek because by my watch, it's 1 a.m. in Sydney. I'm curious, I know that data is really important to the success of the growth groups, but also these other groups. But it looks like the Snowplow MR around getting user IDs in has stalled. I'm curious how you see that being, or the way I see it is that's a symptom of a bigger problem of we're growing really fast and I'm worried about things falling. Do you have an idea? Is this part of that? And then how do we address that?
So I can answer that one. So you're right. So what we've gone through a global optimization exercise to identify individuals within the company that can assist in growth. We've had one engineer, Ash McKenzie, who's been really helpful in getting us through some initial periods of work, but unfortunately his vacations then coincided with the particular merge request that you're referring to. To go back a step though, we do have new engineers coming online, as I mentioned, within the next week. And separately, with what you're saying around the importance of data, we've recently had some movement of engineers that we've had that have formed a new telemetry team. So we're taking requisitions from the Defend team and putting them into a new team, which is telemetry, split out from the original fulfillment team, which will give us additional firepower in that area.
Glad to hear it. Thanks for the context.
I was
Yeah.
just going to say, just to add a little bit of flavor on the end of that from a product side, we're waiting on compliance to write some stuff up for that as well. So there is a little bit on that area as well as Ash being on holiday.
Yeah, and I guess I'll give like a little bit of a broader context color too. One of the things that we made a change recently was fulfillment used to handle licensing and billing and also the telemetry framework. So that includes things like Snowplow, which is primarily used to gather user metrics and product data inside of inside of the application, but also things like usage ping, which sends us data from on-prem self-managed instances. And we've actually broken telemetry out into its own group to provide it a little bit more focus. And so, Emily, to kind of answer your question a bit more directly, we are going to keep moving on this issue in this MR today. Obviously, the MR is not incredibly complicated from a code perspective, but it does have some legal and compliance implications, and it's typically on product to drive those types of things forward and to make sure that they move forward. And so we'll continue to do that. And obviously, this past week was a little bit challenging with respect to vacations. I know I was personally out, so I wasn't able to help drive a lot of these. And with the 4th of July, it was a short week for many. But the point is for the product managers in each of these areas to drive these things and make sure that they don't stall out, as you mentioned. And with respect to telemetry, we are hiring again. So just a quick plug for that area. It's a super exciting area that'll help drive a data foundation and framework for the application for many years to come. So, just a quick plug if you're interested in that, or if you're watching on YouTube, let me know if telemetry interests you, and let me know if you're interested, and I can have a quick conversation with you. Sid, looks like you've got another quick question on the heels of that one.
Yeah, I see that issue, and I see that we're looking at tracking, and we're checking that with our privacy policy, and we should. I just want to make sure that we understand that this is an internal system. Like, we're using this to improve our product. We're not sending this data out to any external party. And I think in the way it's discussed in the issue, this is like we're sending data to AOL or something. I think there's an enormous difference. Like, if people are active on GitLab.com, they will generate events in our data stores. That happens today already. If you do something on GitLab.com, you generate events in our database. This is another way of capturing that. We should have data, like say user X did Y, but as long as it's in our data store and we only publish aggregate metrics, I'm not sure whether we need to make this opt-in. I think we can turn it on for everyone by default, but I'm not sure, so we should check that. But I would like to see that distinction between like tracking in an external, sending data out externally, and tracking people in internal systems.
If I could tag on to that, I want to echo Sid in that we already know what issues you create on GitLab.com. We already know what labels you add. We already know what merge requests you create. We already know when they're merged. This tracking is just going to give us the how of what you're doing. And so I don't really understand the compliance blocker, but I'll look into the issue more to understand and see where the discussions could turn out there.
I think as far as the compliance blocker side of things, I think it's just that Mel and Candice want to make sure that the privacy policy is properly up to date, so that when this data is being collected, it's really clear to both people who work at GitLab and people who don't work at GitLab and who we're collecting data from are clear on what it is that we're collecting and why. It's more of a transparency thing than anything else, and making sure that we've just crossed all our T's and dotted all of our I's. But I've just added a quick update to the MR to get an update from both of those folks to see what's the hold up on that.
And to answer your question directly, Sid, we are absolutely differentiating between internal and external systems. In fact, this was the impetus behind moving our snowplow collection systems off of third-party infrastructure into in-house. And so this is, as Luca mentioned, just the final, making sure we go through the right process, and we're updating our privacy policy. We're making sure that we're transparent to the community and doing this the right way. But we shouldn't have any issue getting this done. It's just a matter of making sure that we kind of follow the right process.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, we don't have any more questions, but happy to.
Can maybe in that case, can we elaborate on what we think the first thing is the engineers are going to work on to increase like adoption, retention, and the two other things?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to slide 6, the first thing that we're going to work on is new onboarding. And so this is actually something that I ask a lot of growth candidates in the pipeline to elaborate on and what the pain points are. So if you're listening, you just got an interview tip. But the onboarding experience is not very good right now. When a new user signs in, there's basically 4 boxes you can click on to take various actions. And we assume that you want to take one of those 4, but we know nothing about you, your role. Maybe one of those 4 things is not what you should be doing. And so we're going to ship the new onboarding in 12.1 behind a feature flag. You can see it in issue 57832. I'll link it in the doc here. So that's the first thing. The second thing that we're going to work on is the sign-up flow. The sign-up flow is not very good. It's also not good for how customers can purchase plans. Luca can elaborate on this a little bit, but the experience for when customers sign up and decide they actually want to purchase a GitLab license is actually very painful right now. And so we're going to fix that as well. And right now we're working on the plan to do that. Luca, I don't know if you want to add any color to that plan as well.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things around this, and specifically where we have some higher priority endeavors around just generally improving our purchase flow and also improving our trial flow, both of which are related to what happens when you sign into GitLab, when you want to try out GitLab, and when you want to purchase GitLab. So yeah, those are 2 of our biggest priorities at the moment, because I mean, trials are essentially that's the first time you experience working with GitLab, and right now I think it's equally as important as onboarding, and it's sort of that first step in onboarding. So you have trials as step number 1, you have purchasing as step number 2, and then you have onboarding as step number 3, and I think it's important to treat those all as a similar priority.
So those are the next 2 things, Sid.
Cool. There's a thing about using Flipper for A/B testing. What is Flipper? The link is broken, so I can push on it.
Yeah, I'm fixing the link right now. Bartek, can you take that one while I fix the link?
Yeah, so Flipper is our our Ruby gem that we use for feature toggling. And we've been using that to do some rudimentary A/B testing. So turn a feature on for a certain amount of time, turn it off to be able to test 2 different things. The issue that Eric is linking now is iterating towards a better solution to be able to do proper A/B tests. And that'll be one of the first pieces of work, along with what Eric mentioned earlier, that will get the engineers on.
Yeah, so we have our own feature flags as a functionality, GitLab.com. Can we use that instead of Flipper?
So my understanding of that, the technology that we have and the capability that we have, is that it lets us, it doesn't necessarily let us do statistical analysis across multivariate tests. So we can certainly look into that and look at what the options are, but we wanted to look at a really full-featured A/B testing solution. And there are several available that we have linked to that issue.
Yeah, but now we're not suppose you're using GitLab as a customer. You want a full-featured solution, right? GitLab got feature flags, so it's not we need to have a very compelling reason to not use our own product. And and feature flags, like, they're hard. It's going to be hard, but now I think we brought GitLab down with feature flags the week that I was away. Now we're not using that lesson to kind of improve the product for our customers.
Understood. I'll look and see if there's any gaps with what we currently offer, and then we can either improve our product. That's probably, that'd be the best approach.
Thanks for considering dog fooding.
I think this is Brandon. I think I have next question. Just was curious, Luca. I like the notion of thinking of the different stages. Question: would it be at all make it any easier for self-managed customers if we made it any easier for them to deploy or do a trial, for example, in a public cloud from a self-managed? And is there anything there that we can at the Alliance can help with? But just curious if that ties any way to make it easier and faster for customers from what you've seen.
Can you elaborate on that question a little bit? When you say deploy in a public cloud, are you talking about essentially a managed service while we provide a trial for them?
No, just a self-managed. Like, is it when you go through, the nuances of what it takes for a customer to go through a checkout and a trial. When they're going through the trial process, would a easy click to deploy kind of option for them make that easier? Currently, I don't think we do anything like that, so that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's kind of what I meant by provide. So what you're suggesting is we would essentially spin up a server for them to play with and test on that isn't GitLab.com, right? Sure.
I think there's a couple ways of thinking of it for sure.
Yeah,
so that would be one for sure.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I think it's something we can definitely explore. I'm not sure how heavily that would specifically fall under fulfillment right now. That might involve like other areas of product to chip in on that. But I think it's a great idea. And I think it's definitely something we can talk about.
Okay. Sure. Do you see it? I get curious. Is that kind of, as you guys have been talking to customers, does that seem like, if it's not a pain point, that's great too. I just was wondering if that came up in your guys' conversations with customers.
It hasn't specifically since I have worked in product. When I was working in customer success, the reason I asked specifically about whether or not you were talking about a managed service was that is something that customers have spoken about. Specifically, Goldman Sachs have brought that up. They've said we would much rather not have to deal with setting this all up ourselves and hosting our own infrastructure, but they also don't want to be on GitLab.com. So I'd be curious to know if allowing something like that would mean that they would be like, well, why can't we just host it? Why can't we just have our own managed service then if you're going to start?
That's a different extras. That's like a managed service provider kind of setup. Got it.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. It's a can of worms, but a good one, I think.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Just one quick call out here. We have made this a little bit easier, especially for Ultimate users, by providing the AWS Marketplace listing recently. That's something that's like literally a few clicks and you can have a working install of EE right at your fingertips on AWS. That doesn't necessarily incorporate a trial process, but it is at least a springboard we could build on top of if we wanted to consider something like this, Brandon.
Yep. I'll keep working on getting you guys feedback on it. But yeah, that actually, as it turns out, there are there's a handful of customers that already are using that, which is great. So are deploying that way. The trial part would be an interesting other aspect to it. So,
yeah, I think it depends on what the customer wants to get out of the trial, right? Like, what is it specifically they're trying to trial? Like, if they do have to host it on their own infrastructure ultimately, then maybe that's what they want to trial. But if it's just GitLab, the product, like the front end of it, then maybe that's something that would be really beneficial to them. We'd have to do some research. It's a great suggestion, though. Thank you.
Another thing too is we also have a marketplace listing for GitLab CE, which obviously would be free. From a license perspective, it would cost users infrastructure. If they didn't want to trial, obviously on GitLab.com, that would be a way for them to, cheaply evaluate at least the CE edition on AWS.
Isn't the EE listing free as well, as long as you don't add a trial key?
Currently, we have a CE listing and an Ultimate listing, at least with Amazon and with Google, and there's a bunch of reasons. There's reasons behind that, but one I think it's a good time to dig in to see if we can't adjust to that.
I would much prefer if we have an EE listing and an Ultimate listing. You can use the EE without a license, because now people have to do a complete reinstall in order to become a customer. So we're basically putting a giant roadblock in the way for anyone to start using our paid features. So I think we should definitely do that.
Yeah, let me just clarify real quick on the AWS Marketplace. So there's actually two paths for kind of AWS listings. There's just general community AMIs, Amazon Machine Images, and then there's the curated marketplace. So on the as AMIs, we have Community Edition and Enterprise Edition, which comes with no license. So customers are free to use that and apply their own license that they've procured from us outside of that process. The curated path was essentially like the MVC version of allowing us to do what we call a private offer through AWS, so that customers could basically purchase GitLab licenses with their AWS EVP or AWS credits. So that was kind of the path that we took. But customers do have that option today, Sid, to basically do like a one-click EE install and then apply a license.
But I think that the confusion here a bit is that EE would necessarily be paid. I think it's a great thing that people can use EE without paying. So I'm not even sure why we're maintaining a CE offering, because it doesn't need, like 99% of the customers would be better off just installing
EE.
Yeah.
I'll work on that, Sid. I think there was some history there as to Amazon's point of view, which I believe may be evolving. So I'll take that since I brought up the question idea. I will put that, I've put it to Amazon. We'll see on if we can get to that, because I think you're right, for customers, that's a best option if that's everywhere for them.
Thanks.
And it looks like we're out of time. So thanks everyone for a great group conversation. See everyone later.